All human wisdom is contained in these two words: wait and hope. Hi, Scott from Gunpowder, Fiction and Plot, and today we're going to review my all-time favourite book, Alexandre Dumas' The Count of Monte Cristo. Right now there's a lot of booktubers out there talking about books by black authors, and that's fantastic. And Alexandre Dumas, if you didn't know, is a black author. One of the reasons why I really want to review this book is because of what a lot of people are doing at the moment is they're reviewing a lot of serious books about race issues, which is totally important and totally something that you should read. But once you're done reading those books, don't go back to reading white classics authors and white fantasy authors. You've got to read a variety all the time, and unless you're a very specific sort of reader, you don't want to be reading those sort of heavy books all the time. You want to be reading a variety of genres, and I feel like this is a great example of a really good book that you can read by a very talented black author who is not writing about those issues that have been discussed with the Black Lives Matter movement. So it's a really good way of, it's just a way of supporting black authors that isn't being talked about at the moment for good reason, but I just wanted to give you a bit of variety in there. Now, before I discuss the book, I just wanted to discuss a little bit about Alexandre Dumas. His father was a Haitian slave, and he worked his way up to the highest ranking the highest ranking black person in Napoleon's army. And if you actually just get onto Wikipedia and look that up, it's a super interesting story. He ended up being captured in Italy, and if you read the story, you'd swear that his son was writing it, because it's just such an all action-packed life. It's utterly ridiculous an utterly ridiculous life that you would expect in an adventure novel. Now, this book, I think you probably all know about this book, and I think you either fit into one of two categories. You've read it and hooray, or you'd like to read it but you're intimidated because it's that thick. So this novel is, this version of the novel I have is 1,462 pages. That puts it at a similar length to Les Mis and War and Peace, which are very intimidating but brilliant works. This is a brilliant work, but it is not as intimidating. Once you start reading this, you'll really realize that it flows really easy. For a novel that was written in the 1840s, this is so much more accessible than other authors of that time. The 1840s is sort of when Dickens and the Brontes were writing. It's in the middle of Victor Hugo's career, and I think Dumas is the most accessible of all of those writers. He's definitely the easiest to read. So even though it is that thick, it's actually a really good one for somebody who has, I probably wouldn't say your very first classic novel, but for somebody who doesn't have many classic novels under their belt, this is a really good one to begin with. If you have watched a movie of this, understand that you've watched a 3-hour movie for 1,462 pages. You haven't watched, the book. It's just, you can't turn that into the movie. That's just ridiculous. That is taking 5% of this, adding 50% of your own junk, and making it into a storyline, cutting out all the major characters except for maybe 2 of them. So why should you read this book? Well, first of all, the plot is fun and action-packed. Secondly, it has lots of cool themes and literary merit to it. And it's really the marriage of these two things. You've got a book that actually does poke you in the brain and asks questions that is not often asked in other books, to be honest. They're rarer questions. And you've got that packed in with just one of the most epic stories that you're ever going to read. If I were to compare this to any other novel that I've read, just for that combination of things, the only thing I can really think of that is similar is The Lord of the Rings, in that you've got that epic storyline, and then you've got you've got those questions and those themes that you can discuss, and it could be a serious literary textbook as well. So this tells the story of Edmund Dante. Edmund Dante is a young up-and-coming man, and it all goes to shit for him. He ends up in jail. He doesn't know why he's in jail. And that's horrible, but it's almost the best thing that could have happened to him, because while he's in jail, he meets this awesome guy who tells him where a treasure is, tells him, educates him, teaches him multiple languages, and when he eventually does get out of jail, and I feel like that's kind of a spoiler that he gets out of jail, but honestly, he gets thrown in jail so early on that if you don't realise he breaks out and there's a story beyond the jail, then it's not really a spoiler. Anyway, then Edmund becomes the Count of Monte Cristo. He's strong, fast, he can shoot, he's educated, he's intelligent, he's compassionate, he's loyal. He's the sort of person that you just want to be friends with. And he tracks down the 4 people who are responsible for his imprisonment. And he infiltrates himself into their lives. And then he has the question of, what should he do? Instead of the plot from that point developing along the lines of how Edmund is going to make these people pay, Edmund then questions what he should do and what is fair, and this is a really interesting theme, and I think this book is actually a precursor to the Marvel comic Batman. It's actually very similar if you look at it. Parents murdered, very rich, super powerful, lots of things in common between the two of them. So what you've got this awesome plot, you've got these themes about what it means to be human, what it means for this revenge, and then Edmund's asking himself, will I be happy if I take revenge? And that is another interesting question, and he explores happiness, and he tries to figure out what will make him the happiest, and then he tries to balance that with justice and providence and all of these things. So it's, there is a lot of, for an action-packed book, there's a lot of internal dialogue happening where you're just listening to Edmund's thoughts, and it adds a level of complexity to this book, which doesn't take away from the plot if you're just after an action-packed plot, but does add so much richness to this novel that it's not like a Sherlock Holmes book where you read your Sherlock Holmes book and you either enjoy it or you don't enjoy it, but it's done. There's a lot to think about in this book. And then lastly, you have the characters. You don't just have the Count, but in Dongla you have one of the best villains. In Noirtier, I don't know how to describe this character of Noirtier. but he's just such an awesome character, and that scene with him and Valentine and the wedding, and that is my favourite scene in the book. And so if you have read the book, you'll know that scene is absolutely amazing. And then you've got de Villiers, who is again another villain, and what Dumas can do here is he's been able to make his good guys and bad guys very black and white, but he's been able to show you the mechanisms that lead them to their sides, and so he hasn't made them black and white, but he's shown you it from the Count's point of view, so it's more black and white than it is, and you can reanalyze it from different points of view and you can see that there's complexity here, that maybe it's not as black and white as you think. And then you have the second generation. I always think that it's really interesting when you have the two generations in a book, the parents and the children. The children are of that sort of 16 to 21 age, that it adds this real depth to a novel. I often find that novels that have significant even numbers of those two generations are quite good. Things like Little Fires Everywhere or The Casual Vacancy are good examples of that. And the Count of Monte Cristo introduces this second level. One of the things the Count has to consider is that he's been away for so long and the world hasn't stood still. The world has moved on, and what may have been easy vengeance suddenly has consequences. And can he enact vengeance on the people that have done him wrong without hurting the people that he still cares about? And as he becomes more entwined into their lives and he develops his own alliances, it becomes murkier and muddier and more complex. In the end, it just develops into this wonderful novel. If you just want to read a trashy adventure novel, then this is for you. And if you want to read something with a bit of literary merit, this is for you. The last thing I will say about the length is, I think if this was published today, it would have been published in 3 volumes. And what you could quite easily do is stop. Certainly the first part of this book, which goes for a bit over a third, that takes place in the Chateau d'If, that could be a stopping point. You could read that, you could take a break, you could read another book, you can come back to this and go on from there, and sort of break it up a little bit, which would make break it up into 400-page sections would make this a lot more easier to break down if you did it over 3 months or 6 months and just did 400 pages at a time. Anyway, I rate this book as my best book I've ever read. On my rating systems, I have a 5-star rating systems. Then I read a really good book and I rated it 5+, and then I read this book and I had to rate it 5++. So I guess that's 7 stars. I don't know. Anyway, I hope you picked this book up. I hope you enjoy it. If you've read this book, let me know what you thought of it in the comments. I'm sure you've loved this book because I've never met anybody that didn't like it. But if you didn't like it, let me know in the comments as well. Let me know why it's not the best book ever in the comments. Alright, have a great Thursday. Bye.